Fallout New Vegas has been beaten in more ways than I was as a child. In the event that we don't want to bestow upon that trait to any potential microplastic-filled offspring, we may want to look to lowering our arms and attempting pacifism. When you Google the word pacifist, you find a WikiHow article about being pretty, and a harebrained definition from this thing called the Dictionary that reads a person who believes that war and violence are unjustifiable. I personally love violence, so we're going to tweak the rules a little bit for this run. No using weapons or fists. It's no surprise that beating somebody's meat sack with your knuckles counts as ruining your pacifistic tendencies, but it felt important to mention. Quests that result in someone's demise are acceptable. Who am I to blame if a random explosion burned an orphanage, or a sonic emitter killed a few ants? As long as I didn't use a weapon to kill something directly, it's not my problem. Very hard difficulty and hardcore mode selected. You know how we like it here. So we've got a scuffed definition of pacifism presented to the council, but why dead money? Dead money is one of those DLCs that you either love or hate, but to materialistic and resourceful players like myself, we realize that the Sierra Madre sets you up nicely for the rest of the game with some decent armor and near infinite amounts of doctor's bags, medics, and weapon repair kits. I just realized that weapon repair kits in a weaponless run don't really make that much sense. Hindsight 2020. Also, the gold is nice, even if we never spend it. The only thing that we're letting go of this run is our erectile dysfunction. This means that if for whatever reason we wanted to try to beat the rest of the game as a pacifist, it should be a little bit easier using these resources. However, that is a problem for future me, so without further ado, get on your thigh highs and let's gear up to tackle dead money as a pacifist. To begin our adventure, I set up from Doc Mitchell's bed and named myself Double A because I'm going to need as much energy as possible to get through this run. This is further indicated by my choice of gender, so I have something nice to look at whenever I find myself in a hard spot. In terms of my special stats, I went with a high endurance and luck so that I could take a bunch of punches and clear out the casinos. For my tag skills, I went with science, speech, and survival. Science is going to be useful for several early game skill checks for additional experience, but it will also act as a backup for a few checks once we actually get to dead money. Speech is also for early game experience, but survival is for Radchild. Logan's Loophole and Skilled were chosen for my traits so that I could take as many chems as I wanted and have a few extra skill points to play around with. With my time at Doc Mitchell's coming to an abrupt end, I dragged my bussy through Hidden Valley, said hello to Uncle Neil, and thought about what it would be like to be crushed under two massive spherical objects. This all, of course, brought me to the Wreck Caravan where I snagged up some early game combat armor that will improve my cap amount and survivability. One of my favorite early game quests to do as soon as I get to Freeside is GI Blues, and this can be done by simply talking with the king, encouraging Oris to come out of the closet, and getting Kieran out of the therapy that her parents forced her into. These minor activities get me to an astounding level 4. I put 33 points into science, 11 into speech, and a special point into intelligence, as well as grabbing comprehension for better use of magazines. While we had come pretty far in such a short time, my pockets were looking a little bit empty, so I traded with Ventertron and Mick for the naughty nightwear so that I could dress up like I did back in the day. Several points throughout this challenge when we're gambling, you'll see me betting an exorbitant amount, and this is of course a mod, but do know that it only changes the amount that you can bet and not the maximum amount that you can earn, so I'm sure to break the bank of the Atomic Wrangler, Gamora, the Tops, and the Ultralux. Throughout this experience, I put 15 points into speech, 5 into science, and 9 into survival. I also managed to grab Old World Gourmet, but this perk was more of a backup for additional healing in case we got stuck. With all those fat stacks obtained from gambling, I bought every single implant except for Charisma and began walking my fine self to the Boomers for some additional experience. Getting blasted in more ways than one, I asked if Pearl was still interested in my grandpa's number. She said yes, and I gave it to her, but I have no clue if they'll hit it off. Godspeed, Boomers. Chatting with the child and popping over to Raquel so that I could get the generators back going again, I'm encouraged to go to Helios to snag up the available solar panels. While I'm here, I reset the mainframe connection on the two terminals outside, educated a turret on what it means to be free use, and ran as fast as I possibly could through the arrays of robots in order to end up sending the power to Fremont and Westside like a good little boy. Ignacio claps me on the back before encouraging me to stop by later, and with that I'm at level 7, where I bump up my repair and my speech before returning to Nellis and repairing the solar panels. Since I had plenty of science, Loyal and Jack sent me on the way with a rebreather, but I got distracted with how hot Lieutenant Monroe was. For a little bit more experience, I disabled the situation between the cons and the NCR, allowing me to bump up my repair and grab Stonewall. As I'm sure you figured out by now, we need a bunch of levels before we get to dead money if we want to have a smooth experience. If you struggle at all with dead money in the past, chances are you haven't had enough science or repair to make some of the obstacles in the game a little bit easier. I have taken the time to beat dead money at level 1 before, but that isn't something that I aim to repeat. Something I do aim to repeat is visiting Rana for her slight curves and delicious casserole. Surprisingly, this goes rather smoothly with the help of Turbo and some luck. After reuniting the two mistresses, I decided to ironically visit Vault 22, but before that I had to be put in my place. Since I wasn't liked by the NCR, they didn't like me using the train, so they ran a train on me. But for some reason I immediately received a way to booty call them. Talk about mixed signals. I talked with Thomas Hildren, walked the wrong way to Vault 22, passed by Red Lucy's Red Room, and launched into the green butthole that we've come to love inside and out. Since I can't use any weapons, I just end up downloading the data and leaving Keely to her fate for a nice tasty chunk of experience, getting me to level 9 for more repair and speech. Incredibly thirsty for the last little bit of experience that I wanted, I hit up my ex-girlfriend Julie Farkas, watched Mick and Ralph slaughter 4 men in quite possibly the worst display of accuracy possible, and cured 2 people of their drug addictions using nothing but my charm. My journey in Freeside took me to Old Ben, and as someone who is incredibly into old people, I hired him on the spot to work at the Atomic Wrangler. With Beatrix potentially being even older and my general curiosity regarding her genitals, I had to add her to the ranks, but perhaps the most pleasurable addition to the Garrett's team is none other than everyone's favorite robot. James is excited by this prosperity, as am I when I end up grabbing Radchild and a little bit more repair. This is shortly followed by me radiating myself at Moe's residence and finally making my way to Dead Money, excited to prove my resilient nature and unflinching strength through adversity. Now that we're getting to the real meat and potatoes of what we've been preparing for, I scrape around on my hands and knees with my ass raised up, ready to be slapped by any nearby ghost. By collecting as many things as possible right at the start, we can ensure that we are able to adapt to any unforeseen circumstances. One of the more beneficial things that I picked up from the police station was the Sierra Madre armor. Despite being light armor, it has one of the best defenses you can get early on. Getting through the basement is always a piece of cake, but the hardest part of the police station is dealing with God and Dog, as it seems like any dialogue option has no effect. This is because I am smooth-brained and uneducated in the aspect of patience. Eventually, however, I end up grabbing Dog for this run, as I've gotten relatively comfortable with finding all the traps because of how often I hang out with them. Much to my surprise, the ghosts don't actually deal that much damage when one-on-one. Whether it's a combination of our high DT and endurance, or simply Radchild restoring my HP fast enough that I don't even notice it missing. This ends up seeing me reach Dean, which I avoid flirting with in any capacity so that hopefully we can have a peaceful ending for him. This had me feeling pretty good, and I continue looting around as much as possible, including grabbing as many Dean stashes as I came across. Dog is an okay companion, however I prefer to grab God and have him wait at the fountain, that way I don't have any unforeseen circumstances with his collar blowing up. This might seem shocking to many of you given my previously stated love of good boys, but I suppose you could say absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's inside the medical clinic that I start using repair to disable the holograms. Despite having completed this location many times before, I struggled to find the key for the basement, and after spending 3 minutes longer than what was necessary, Dog came inside me in more ways than one, allowing me to rescue Christine and continue bumping up my skills. The BP boys, or the speakers in this section, certainly added a little bit of anxiety to my already racing heart. But at the end of the day, Christine guided me to safety, and I was back at Father Elijah before you could say I wish I could have genuine long-lasting relationships that bring me happiness. Stepping on a few more traps later and dodging past several ghosts, I somehow managed to misplace Dog in all the fog. Despite a couple resets and me requesting a leash, it wasn't long before I was able to pick up a cage that was rather fitting for God. If hell is a place, I've definitely managed to secure my spot. Speaking about burning in a pit for all of eternity, gas bombs were definitely not my favorite thing, and they were the closest things to kill me yet. Fortunately, with Dean's strapping hands, he carried me over the threshold and took me out for dinner. As a result, I got to know his parents and learned that they needed some assistance with their computers. With my non-existent IT background and a 3-day coding bootcamp in my arsenal, I felt more than equipped and was able to help them out. Unfortunately, it was now time to say goodbye to his parents and my career thanks to the current market. Shocking to many as it may be, I learned that I liked women, so I swept Christine off of her petite feet and took her to the place to change her sexual preferences, as I fully intended on being the new bottom in the relationship. She was already gay, so hopefully conversion to being a top won't be seen as immoral. With a repair at 60, you can jury the circuit breaker, preventing you from having to scramble around on rooftops. Disarming a few traps and grabbing a skill book, I end up at the final room of this location where a turret began shooting my backside. Little did it know I was in a wax play and it didn't bother me at all. By grabbing the key off the desk and the password in the locker, I could make my waifu be completely content should she ever find a way to look past my cum-scented clothes. The last step before getting to the hotel itself was triggering the event. I was of course able to sell all of my goods along the way and pick up a few more of Dean's stashes, but ultimately it was more of the same. Dashing through the fog, just right over the trap's way, through the wine cellar we go, partying all the way. Purchasing a few last-minute supplies, I found myself inside of the hotel where I performed quite possibly the best juke I've ever performed. This ultimately allowed me to sneak past the holograms and disable as many as I could on the way through. But at the end of it all, I employed the screwy ball strategy and everything worked out just peachy. I of course gambled and won a substantial amount of caps before purchasing a few more consumables. At this point I was sitting more than pretty. I wasn't really concerned about my health or survivability thanks to my build, but I was concerned how close to pacifism I would get. My soul began feeling the weight of leaving Dog in the cage, and with knowing that he was somewhere in the casino, I felt like I owed it to him to try to save him. The upper sections of the casino can prove quite deadly thanks to the holograms, but because we've played Dead Money a few times here on the channel, several of these slightly hidden progression points were known, so I took my time and continued to grab as many supplies as I could, even if I couldn't use them. In the back of my head, I still had the idea of selling items for pre-war money and exchanging them for chips back in the casino. Fortunately, however, that wasn't necessary, and Christine and I got along just dandy, allowing me to bump up my speech and snag out Vera's dress, guaranteeing that I would be able to pass any speech check necessary. If only I had the option. At this point, I hadn't died at all. That changed. Long story short, it turns out that if you don't destroy the speaker in the section prior to seeing Dog or God, walking through the door to the kitchen will cause the sound to carry over into the next area. The door is sealed as soon as you enter unless you disable the gas, which there isn't enough time to do. It might not surprise many of you that it took me a while to come to this conclusion. When I had finally figured it out and was able to fix it by entering in the door outside of the range of the speaker, Dog was in a bad spot to save him from his own self-destruction. While I didn't kill him, his blood will stain both sets of my cheeks for as long as I live. With Dog and God unfortunately dead, though not to my fault, I began to meet up with Dean. Fortunately, with a 100 repair, I could disable the hologram emitter so that I could have a smooth exit. This is the area of Dead Money that I am least familiar with, and something that I definitely need to replay a few times to get the hang of it, but not being able to use the weapons to destroy the BB boys seemed to make this a little bit trickier than I remember. Regardless, I was able to chat with Dean thanks to my stunning dress, and made it back out on the upper level to begin the final portions of Dead Money. When entering the bunker below, I immediately decide that I'm going to try to sneak out of the vault and leave Elijah to his fate, but before I did, I needed to blow my load all over myself several times. Not being able to shoot the VP boys in this section had me thinking that this wasn't possible, but since we had cleared it with a rolling pin in the past, I just had to muster up enough courage to come out on top. And come out on top I did. I snuck past the holograms in the way that Godzilla would, stole all of the gold bars, popped a stealth boy through the process of boofing, and left Elijah in the vault to study the furry community until the end of time. Despite the loss of Dog and God, I feel comfortable saying that you can beat Dead Money as a pacifist. If you enjoyed this video, tickle the like button's adorable little feet. Want to support me and get your name displayed here? Consider becoming a channel member or patron. If you are interested in joining the channel's Discord, the link is in the description. With all that being said, do me a favor, will ya? Have a good one.